Welcome back to our Shades of Evil vlog. Episode 1, The Story of Jolly Joseph. Chapter 2. Jolly produced the will after Roy's funeral, and although Rojo and Ranji had objections, the document was declared to be legally binding, and all the assets of Tom Thomas were now officially in Jolly's name. The family felt that, perhaps Tom, realizing his son would never amount to much, left his fortune to the couple. He probably figured that in Jolly's name the assets would not be squandered. She had a degree in finance after all. By this time she had perfected the role of caring, respected matriarch. Ranji and Rojo had immigrated respectfully to Sri Lanka and Florida. If they protested the will, it would seem to have been as sour grapes. For the sake of peace in the family, the matter of the will was pushed aside. One would be mistaken to think that Jolly was satisfied with the state of affairs. She was head of the family, seemed to have a respectable job and admired in her community. After her arrest, there were rumors that Jolly was a sex addict. There was no evidence of this. She did, however, take to seducing men when the fancy took her. Roy, on the other hand, must have been aware of the infidelity, which often took place under his own roof, and who, combined with the grief after losing two parents, dove even deeper into the bottle. Once a tiger tasted human blood, the saying goes, it is unable to stop hunting for the taste of human flesh. Roy's drinking was getting out of control, and after having succeeded to murder effortlessly twice before, Jolly started planning the demise of her husband. One of the people she was having an affair with was M.S. Matthews, not to be confused with the uncle mentioned at the beginning. Ironically, he was a cousin and regular drinking partner of Roy. She was confident in the spell she had woven around M.S. Matthews, to the point that she approached him blatantly about the procurement of cyanide. Later, M.S. Matthews would vehemently deny knowing of the murder plot. According to him, Jolly wanted to get rid of big rats. One cannot help to wonder if that was a bit of a Freudian slip. M.S. Matthews had a friend, Poyu Kumar, who owned a jewelry shop. Cyanide is used in the cleaning and coloring of gold, and jewelers have a license for it. Kumar, who was a known Casanova, was easily convinced to part with some of his product for a promise of sex with Jolly and 5,000 rupees, which translates to about $90. Fortunately for us, Jolly gave a rather graphic statement about the night of the 30th of September, 2011. Roy had gone out drinking and, although it was a Friday night, Jolly sent the boys to bed early. She had prepared Roy's favorite rice and chickpea curry, and once she was certain the boys were asleep, she went to the kitchen, retrieved the cyanide she had hidden in the coffee tin, and laced not only his meal, but also the glass of water she was accustomed to serve with his meal. She then went to lie down next to the sleeping children, and she waited. Roy eventually came home, checked on his sleeping family, and went back to the kitchen, presumably to eat his supper. It was the first time Jolly used cyanide, and she became anxious when she heard no further sounds. She went to the kitchen and found the half-eaten plate of food, but no Roy. Suddenly, from the direction of the washroom, she heard wrenching and choking. Roy was clearly in distress, but Jolly was taking no chances. She waited till all sounds from the washroom subsided before she ran to Mangiardi Matthews, Roy's uncle, who immediately had a locksmith open the door, which Roy had locked from the inside. This time, when Jolly shouted cardiac arrest, Mangiardi Matthews did not agree. People in his family were dropping like flies, and he insisted on answers. He requested an inquest, which Jolly refused. He then approached Roy's siblings and asked for permission for an autopsy from them. Rojo, who had already suspected foul play, readily agreed, and after the cause of death was revealed to be potassium cyanide poisoning, all turned to Jolly for an answer. By now she had perfected the art of cunningly deceiving and manipulating people. She told the family Roy had been so devastated by the loss of his parents that he had drank poison and committed suicide. Most of the family accepted this explanation and even agreed to having the original cause of death listed as cardiac arrest, to spare the family more grief. Little did they know that Jolly had no intention of slowing down on her path of death and destruction. Mangiadii Matthews, however, could not console himself with the verdict of the death. Rojo and Renya's objections now seemed more viable. When his sister Anama died, it was deemed natural. He knew his brother-in-law was struggling after the death of his wife, so that death was even in a way to be expected. The deaths of his 3 close relatives might have been coincidental. Accusing Jolly of murdering members of her own family would be seen as outrageous claim, but he could not shake the nagging feeling that the deaths were more than bad luck and that Jolly might be involved. Jolly had been nothing but supportive and kind, and he was sure if it wasn't for her, the family would have crumbled if Jolly was not around. He struggled with the same conflicts of the heart and mind, as many victims of loved ones, who suffer at the hands of close family members do. It's absurd that someone so close to you could be a murderer. In her defense, Jolly had shown nothing but kind respectfulness towards him. The inevitable search for answers would eventually be his undoing. Mangiadii, during a visit at Jolly's home, carefully raised his suspicions about the deaths of his family members. By now we know enough about Jolly to know that her antennas went up. No doubt exists that while Mangiadii was drinking his whiskey from the bottle he brought, Jolly viewed the next obstacle to her freedom and wealth. Conveniently, when her uncle left, Jolly took the opportunity to keep the bottle until the opportunity presents itself, and on the 26th of February, 2014, she was able to execute her 4th murder. While relatives gathered for a wedding, Jolly had heard that Mangiadii would not be attending. She excused herself and collected the cyanide-laced bottle of alcohol Mangiadii had left behind. Once at his home, she prepared him food, but in a clever twist, she used no cyanide in the food. Instead, she just poured him the glass of alcohol to drink and politely refused when he offered her a drink. Jolly then sat back, watching her uncle eat his meal and drinking his beverage, waiting for the poison to take its quick and deadly effect. In her own chilling words, she told police how she sat calmly watching her uncle first start to choke, the foam at the mouth, and then finally fall to the ground. She then got rid of the bottle of alcohol and washed the glass, ensuring no trace of poison could be found, leaving the half-consumed plate of food on the table. Once she knew he was dead, she called for help, shouting, of course, cardiac arrest. A quite plausible reason for a man of 68 and a man with a history of serious heart problems to die from. Only by now, we know better. Only 3 months later, Jolly commits the most senseless and infuriating murder of them all. She openly admits to having 3 abortions when she found out that she was carrying girl children. She had been in love with her departed husband's cousin, Shaju, for many years, and perhaps feeling empowered by the 4 deaths she got away with, she started setting her sights on him. Their accounts would vary about whether they had an affair during this time, but by now anything can be expected of Jolly. On the 5th of May, 2014, only 3 months after the murder of their uncle, the family had been able to gather for a more festive reason. Shaju's son was receiving his first Holy Communion. It was a reason to celebrate, and while Siley, Shaju's wife, played hostess, Jolly seemingly was happily playing with Alphine, the 2-year-old daughter of Siley and Shaju. Jolly was well aware that Siley would be too busy to feed the toddler. She offered to prepare the child some mutton curry and bread, but to ensure she was not implicated, asked another aunt to feed little Alphine. According to Jolly's confession, the first 2 bites went fine. Then the child began to cry. The aunt was instructed to put more food in her mouth. Alphine was just being naughty, but within a minute foam appeared around her tiny mouth and she collapsed on the ground in the grip of debilitating spasms. She was rushed to the hospital, but since the doctors had no idea what they were treating the little girl for, she eventually passed away. The most tragic aspect of this death isn't just the age of the victim, but the reasoning behind the murder. People had become mere pawns in her game of chess, and the loss of a life which would benefit her in the long run was unfortunate, but necessary. She knew she wanted to marry Shaju, and his son was the age of her boys, but she no desire to be the mother and nursemaid to a little girl. The child also had heart and kidney problems, which would increase the amount of care given to her. To Jolly, it just seemed the obvious solution for the problem she foresaw in the grand scheme she was executing. If the way Jolly orchestrated her final murder is not a clear indication that we are dealing with a cool, calculating psychopath, then nothing will sway your mind. Siley was devastated after the death of Alphine. Jolly quickly stepped into the role of pillar to the shattered woman. Jolly would sit with Siley for hours while she cried about the passing of her beloved daughter. Jolly, who had become the embodiment of the words "keep your friends close and your enemies closer," offered the support of a mother, and the closeness of the two women was obvious to everyone. No one can replace the death of a child, but to Siley, having another child became almost an all-consuming purpose. Once there, Shaju went into the dentist's room while his wife, Jolly, and their boys waited in the reception area. By now Jolly had perfected the art of transferring the deadly powder from her handbag, always keeping her nails short and ensuring her hands had no cuts. While they were waiting, Jolly gave Siley a cup of water, laced with cyanide poison. Potassium cyanide is not only hard to detect, smelling only slightly of almonds, and an unsuspecting Siley finished the glass of water. All Shaju would later recall was the cries from his son in the waiting room as his mother collapsed onto Jolly's lap, her body racked in spasms. Bundling everyone into the car, Jolly drove to the hospital, choosing a longer route and a medical facility a little further, in an attempt to ensure Siley was beyond saving by the time she received treatment. This time Jolly succeeded and Siley was declared dead on arrival. Once again no inquest was requested, and in a brilliant move, Jolly ensured that not only someone else signed the death certificate, but that Shaju removes all Silas jewelry. Johnson, who was a long-time friend of the family and also one of the many men Jolly had an affair with, would later identify a piece of jewelry that belonged to Siley as a piece Jolly asked him to sell for her. By now her greed knew no boundaries, and in a bold move, at Silas' funeral, Jolly went to in the usual traditional manner to kiss Silas' corpse exactly the same time Shaju did, giving the false impression that there was some kind of bond between them. Hardly 2 months after the passing of his wife, Jolly approached Shaju with the proposal of marriage, but he opted to wait the customary year before they married, and in 2017, their union was sealed. Thank you for watching. Please join us for our next chapter, Chapter 3 in Episode 1, The Story of Jolly Joseph, here on our YouTube channel. Please like, share and subscribe to keep informed about our latest true crime stories.